More like electronic entertainment evasion. This is Fragments of Silicon.
Well, they can't all be gems. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is the regular crew. Let's get to the news. Let's see, Gallus, why don't you start us off this week?
Still no confirmed cases of coronavirus in Maine, so that's nice. The weather has been warming up significantly, and that's nice. I seem to have gotten over whatever it was that was making it particularly hard for me to sleep. Otherwise, not that much interesting going on aside from just keeping an eye on all the things that are being canceled.
It's probably easier to keep an eye on the things that haven't been canceled yet.
Well, right now I have my eye on the convention that I normally go to in, July? June, whatever. So,
July is a bit in the distance.
Right, so it's obviously not canceled yet, but I'm starting to worry that it might be, depending on how things go.
Wouldn't surprise me. Anyway, anything else?
Not really.
All right. Twilight, you're up.
All right. Well, I mentioned last week I seem to have gotten my allergies riled up thanks to spring coming in, it seems, and I've got the remainders of that little small cough. And it's now weather's warming up quite nicely, about perfect in my opinion. Not too warm, not too cool at night, just about right. Let's see here. Well, work is going pretty well. They've opened up the new cafeteria yesterday, and looks really nice. Now all that's left is get a new floor tile down, and that Starbucks being put in. And let's see, now I'm looking forward to some spring decorating for my porch. I've done a little bit of that already. That's it for me.
All right, Teddy.
Overall, this week has been fairly uneventful. Though yesterday my headphones, my wireless ones, one of the earbuds broke, so I need to look for a replacement. So that's fun. And I also ordered some more RAM for my computer, so hopefully it quits blue screening.
One would hope.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah, hopefully I can get it to limp along till I can get the money together to build a new one. And I think that's really it. I guess in gaming news, I did rent Medieval, the remake of it, on PS4. So far, I've been kind of enjoying it.
All right. Anything else?
Nope, not that I can think of.
All right. This is my go. Let's see. First of all, I just got a new carpet. Not a big carpet. I'm not sure how long this is, but it's for the space in front of my couch. Make sure the underlying carpet doesn't get stained by food and stuff. Let's see. Yeah, springtime is approaching. Means temperatures in the upper 80s are approaching. Got a haircut today.
Is someone being thrust out of an airplane?
Okay.
Adam, did you just get sucked up by a tornado or possibly into the engine of a jet plane?
It's not me.
I think it's John.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard the weird whirling too after Adam had been cutting out a little bit.
Like,
Weird.
yeah.
Your thing was still the one that was lighting up, so.
Yeah.
I don't see where that came from on my end.
Okay, well, anyway, resume, I guess. We'll let you know if it comes back, or if you hear it too, then you would know.
Yeah, I heard it too. Like,
Okay.
I think we all heard it.
Yeah, I heard it too.
Like, it's like I don't think it was a specific. Like, I don't know what that was, but I'm like, anyway, continue on from where I was. Right, Mac. So Mac is still alive. Like, it's sometimes hard to know because he will go months without speaking to any one of us, and then just kind of pop up out of the blue and announce that he's got a new thing for us to mention. What is it? Episode 1 of Covert Ops, I think, has finally been released.
Something like that.
Yeah. I'm like, honestly, I kind of glaze over when he starts going into detail about his stuff these days. It's like, not for nothing, but, he gets very detailed. He's always gotten very detailed about this. Like, but, apparently he and Keith have been working on this thing for about 4 months, 10-hour days. Like, and it's right off to episode 2. He says he still has plans to rejoin this show. Whenever that may occur. Like, no timeline, no serious discussion, but still a thing he plans on doing. So we'll see what happens there. Anyway, so I think that's about it for actual news. So, merrily, we shall roll along to the interview portion of the broadcast. And joining us once again, I don't think anyone knows how many times he's appeared on this program at this point. But
it's been a lot.
Yeah. I'm like, good to have you back, John.
Yeah, good to be back.
Yeah. So, how are things?
Things have been going well. We've noticed with the whole coronavirus getting things shut down in Washington, we're having to start debating whether or not we're still going to be a part of SakuraCon, but then again, who knows if SakuraCon is going to be viable.
You may not have to decide that. SakuraCon may not want to be decided that doesn't want to be a part of anybody.
Well, it's like, how far away is SakuraCon?
April, like 9th or 8th or something around there. It's that like first or second weekend of April. So it's coming up soon, and I think things are starting to head into the sort of peak for the U.S. there.
Very possible. I mean, where's SakuraCon located? Like
Seattle.
Yeah, don't see that lasting. I'm like, considering the entire state of Washington has put a cap on public events.
Yeah, and we have to fly when we do see SakuraCon. We have to fly one of our staff in from Tokyo.
Mm-hmm. I'm like,
good luck with that.
Yeah, we also have other staff that come in to do that one from Canada.
I'm like, I would not put my chips on that event happening. I guess you.
Yeah, not with the because I heard the news today about E3 being canceled too. So.
a Bit Summit got canceled as well. Like,
Yeah. Anime Expo is still going, still set to run,
well, it's like,
but that's in July.
yeah, things in the summer are like July is probably has a bit of room to breathe right now, but
Yeah,
that's
especially with things already calming down over in China.
hmm but you know, who knows how long it'll last here because, well, not for nothing, but the response has been lacking. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's still not enough testing kits to go around. This thing is still spreading. Like, I guess it hasn't hit peak levels yet because Disney's still open for the moment.
It's closed in Japan
Right.
for another week at least.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Japan is closed in Japan, so
I mean,
not literally, but like almost.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want the country that is that right now and that isn't China, it's Italy. Like, pretty much everything's on lockdown over there right now because of
Yeah. That's what I've been
Because
hearing
they
too.
horribly mishandled it at first, so then the only solution is locking down the entire country.
Right. It's granted, it's probably easier to lock down a country like Italy than to, lock down the United States. Given
It's impossible to lock down the United States unilaterally or one person to make that decision because the states have so much individual power. It pretty much has to be on a state level.
Oh yeah,
I was
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
say, especially considering like Italy is the size of a single state.
Right.
Yeah. But how much more of a window of time do you have before you have to make that choice with SoccerCon?
Not a whole lot for SoccerCon, honestly, not a whole lot. But like I said, I don't know what SoccerCon's gonna do too, because I would think that they'd be considering canceling as well.
I'm like, it's very possible. Like, especially, I'm just like Washington State, Seattle. Like, that's kind of like where the worst of it's going on right now. That we know of. Like, that's kind of the key word there. That we know of. This thing is spreading, and it's hard to track because the response.
It doesn't even show symptoms until after you've been infectious for 2 weeks.
Yep. Like, like my state, Tampa has had outbreaks there, and they're weighing on doing capping stuff, and that means WrestleMania may not happen this year. Yeah, it's like just all these events. It's like either they are closing down or they are going without audiences. It's affecting everything. So, I mean, and you might not even have a con schedule for the year. We just don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, like the DC Convention Center is shut down right now, but at the same time, Otakon is still doing all its preparations and stuff as if it's going to go forward. So, and I would assume it would, because Otakon's also there in late July, so this whole thing should be over by then.
Once again, it's possible, but I assume that they're operating under the assumption that all is a go until it isn't.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like they're either doing it or they're not. They're not. They don't have the time or logistics to wait around.
Yeah.
And I suppose that does get to a question about announcements. Like, I assume you might have announcements at like SakuraCon, and in the face of this all being canceled, do you have backup plans in that area?
So luckily, we actually did not have any really big announcements planned for either Anime Boston or SakuraCon. And there again, like, even if we can't do SakuraCon, we should still have a panel at Anime Boston. So if we need to, we can just announce things there. But like I said, fortunately, most of our major announcements we were already planning to have at the later cons in the year, like ASEN and Anime Expo, Otakon, New York. So that'll be more of an issue if this is still a problem a month or two from now.
Yeah, like, so, you know, that's a kind of, I guess, watch this space for further details kind of deal.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, so with that, you know, I guess about as sort of as it is in this current moment in time, moving on to actual visual novels. For those who are watching the stream, you might notice that we are featuring Bokuten again. That is mainly because the visual novels this time around are, well, too hot for the stream. You know, it's like, sometimes we have the not safe for work stuff here, and Twitch does not like that stuff. So
yeah, and for better or worse, the last all ages title we've released at our company has been Bokuten. So
yeah. So, you know, we can still talk about these releases. It's just, you know, showing them is probably a no-go. Anyway, I sort of should start things with, I guess, Fun Bag Fantasy Side Boob Story 2. I mean,
yeah.
Even the titles here, well, they sound as porny as they are.
So, yeah, Fun Bag Fantasy Side Boob Story 2 is actually releasing at midnight tonight. But yeah, for those who have followed the epic Fun Bag Fantasy saga, there was what came before this one is Fun Bag Fantasy 2, which was the prequel to the original Fun Bag Fantasy. And now Fun Bag Fantasy 2 takes place in a different continent off an ocean apart from where the first one takes place. So with Side Boob Story 2, the story now picks up after the end of the original Side Boob story and follows Lute as he ends up washed ashore on the new continent where the second one took place. And yes, go ahead.
I gotta admit, I didn't think I would need a flow chart for something like this.
Everyone underestimates the quality of the story in Fun Bag Fantasy until you play it.
Like, I guess so. Like,
and it's understandable. The art certainly screams, big tits, which, not gonna lie, that is the majority of the sex scenes focus around boobs and boob fetish scenes. But the story itself is like legitimate epic hero's journey.
And so, okay, the main character, I guess, is now washed ashore.
Yeah, so he ends up washed ashore in this new land that he's not familiar with, where he is arrested because, of course, he washed ashore naked. And so they arrest him for indecency and throw him into prison, where he uncovers some illicit smuggling activities that are a smuggling ring that's being ran out of this prison. And so in order to try and, keep the secret covered, they send him on a suicidal mission to go kill this monster that has killed several other bounty hunters before him. And it's through this quest that he meets the new heroines of Side Boob Story 2, which end up being figures important to the kingdoms from Fun Bag Fantasy 2, but it's the people that are in charge of the current era of those kingdoms.
So exactly what are these side stories?
So it's honestly they really are more sequels to the original story, but Side Boob Story 2 is just a fun title.
Okay. I, I mean, I assumed it was just to play on, side story, but
Yeah. It is. It's the original is just Gaiden, which is like extra story or side story. So it's one of the things like when they made Funbag Fantasy, they weren't initially intending to have the side stories, but it was a huge success. So they expanded the story and it kept expanding the story and expanding the story. So
no pun intended, I'm sure.
yes, the story and the ample bosoms tended to keep expanding.
Mind you, I don't know if this has a breast expansion fetish in it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Not. I don't think it actually has breast expansion, but I've definitely noticed that throughout the series, the bust sizes seem to be getting bigger in several of the new characters that are added.
Exaggeration does tend to be the way of franchises. I mean, I suppose another question here is just how many of these games are there?
So, if I remember correctly, I believe Side Boob Story 2 is actually pretty much the end of the original story with Funbag Fantasy 1, with Loot and his story. That pretty much ends at Funbag Fantasy Side Boob Story 2. Now, there is Funbag Fantasy 3, but this is set in a new universe.
So it's just a new game with the title there.
Yeah, so it still follows a lot of the themes and ideas that the series is known for, but they do start a new setting with the actual Funbag Fantasy 3.
Like, makes sense, I suppose. If they've concluded the story.
Yeah.
Like, got to admit that once again, I didn't think I'd need a flow chart for this.
And if I remember correctly, I think Waffle has been hinting at possibly announcing something new in the Funbag Fantasy series as well. So it's possible there might still be more to come yet.
Oh, phrasing. Like, this is going to be filled with this.
Yeah, Funbag, it just never stops coming.
We are mature and rational adults, I assure you. Anyway, so what kind of visual novels outside of the obvious, are these choice oriented? Are they romance based? Like, do you like pick one of the girls and get an ending based off of that?
So it's more choice based. It's a standard visual novel. There's not really, you don't find any gameplay in here like you would in Alisoft's titles. It is all about the choices, all about the story, and all about the women. So there's some choices are which women you sleep with. Others are things like which political issue you decide to pursue when you're faced with like 2 or 3 that need to be dealt with at once, kind of deal. And that causes various divergencies in the routes. I know at least one of the games has one route divide that you access if you choose to come inside one of the heroines during every one of her 8 scenes up to a certain point. And if you have, then at that point you split off into a specific route for her that assumes you have made that decision.
I see. And now, do any of these games hook up in terms of like if you played one and you got a save there, and does it go to another?
No, it's not like that. Side Boob Story, there is a specific ending from the original that it follows up on. Same with, likewise, there is a specific one of the multiple ending in Side Boob Story that Side Boob Story 2 follows up on. And it's typically basically the harem ending.
I see. That. And let's see here. So how long ago did Side Boob Story 2 come out in Japan? Like, how long of a wait did...
I have to look that up.
No, because give us an indication of how close the third one may be.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Because I know the third one was. I know they've done the third one. They did the remaster of the third one, which is 3If. They did a DLC expansion for 3If. So those have already been done in Japan. And Side Boob Story 2 looks like it was the re-release was 2015. Yeah, the original was 2013.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I suppose we should shift forward. And the next title up here is Emoto Paradise 3. Which
this is another series that has been really popular with our fans. People love their little sisters.
Oh, that's depressing. I mean, I suppose that's the first question I have. Like, when we're talking about emotos here, like, is it like actual? Like, is it your actual little? Is this incest or is it adoption?
So in the very first one, they had to release a patch because they realized they had accidentally typoed a line that suggested they weren't blood related. So they released the patch to correct that, to make it clear that they were very much your sisters.
I see. I'm like, clearly this series knows what its audience wants.
Yes.
Well, I suppose, is this series sequential, or is it like a new title each one?
There's with Emoto Paradise 1, you have there's the brother and his 5 sisters. Then in Emoto Paradise 2, it's the children of that harem that you follow. And Emoto Paradise 3, instead of continuing that family line, has gone back, and you are now following the cousin of and his sisters of the main character from the original Emoto Paradise.
And is it 5 girls each time?
Yep.
Huh. And I think I can understand why they had to go back a generation. Look, I know how genetics works. But is it all sister, or is it just like one sister and sisterly? It's like
there's the tsundere little sister, there's the dairy little sister, there's the sporty little sister, there's the young and innocent little sister, and there's the sadistic little sister.
So all your bases are covered.
Exactly.
Yes. Every flavor of the rainbow, I guess. Anyway, are there more of these?
Emoto Paradise 3 is the most current one in the series.
And has this come out already, or is it still in production?
We released that just in time for Valentine's Day.
There are so many ways that could be taken. An infinite range. Oh, the mature talk is the best talk, isn't it? I suppose as mature as anything as Emoto Paradise 3 can get.
Yes.
Like
You gotta have fun with it at some point.
I worry about that. But and I'm guessing that both this and Cyberpunk Story 2 are going to be just for your store.
Correct. There's actually Funback Fantasy Side Boob Story 2, I believe, is on Steam because we've actually managed to get every Funback Fantasy on Steam. So that one will also be releasing on Steam too, actually. Yeah. Side Boob Story 2 will be on Steam.
I think I can spot the difference here, and it's not just say the Emoto thing here, but Steam is very squiggy when it comes to underage representations, even if they may not be underage representations. Although I'm not sure, how old are the girls?
It's that perception, and it's that perception of the Steam viewers. Basically, it's is what it kind of seems to come down to.
Maybe also legal reasons. Like I don't know. Like it's like honestly, that's something that Valve would have to mention. I'm guessing that they haven't mentioned it. Like anyway, so continuing on with the. Well, I'm not sure how porny this one gets, though. I see it's got an all ages title attached to it. But you did want to clarify that this title isn't actually from you. It's a third-party stuff. It's a third-party title that is published on your store, and that is Oshirabu Waifus over Husbandos.
Yeah, so this is a Yuri title that was developed by Scara Somaro, which is the sister brand of Scara Sparrow, which is the developers who created the Expression Amrilato, which we did publish and release. For this particular title, they chose to work with someone else. I think it was probably in-house for the localization. And but this title is not as fantastical or linguistic based as the Expression Amrilato was. It's much more of a straightforward romance title. The main heroine is focused on the husbando that she loves, like literally the male character in her gacha game that she is going nearly bankrupt over trying to pull in the gacha draws. And the main heroine of the game is a woman that falls in love with her and brings this main character the luck to finally pull her husband. So the game follows this sort of, very romantic, one-sided pursuit of the one woman that she tries to convince this other woman to, fall for her as much as she already has.
Like, good luck to her. Like,
yeah.
I mean, gacha addiction is no joke. I'm actually being serious here. Like, people have spent many thousands of dollars, not yen, dollars, on gacha mechanics.
Oh, I know a few who have.
It's not surprising. I mean, Fate brand order is a money magnet for a reason. But anyway, so what else do you have coming down the pipeline that has been announced at this point?
So we do have, obviously we're still working on finishing up the Higurashi series. We do have chapter 8 that is currently, we're doing the programming and beta testing for that. So that will be coming up soon enough this year. We're also finishing up our beta test on Sakura no Mori Dreamers, which is the moe horror title from Moonstone, the creators of Princess Evangile and Emoto Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
We also have Wanyan and Yan Cafe that are finishing up work. Those will be very cute titles for those who like moe girls, cute girls, waitress outfits with cat ears, dog ears.
Right. And well, hopefully you'll be able to go to your conventions. Like,
Yeah, hopefully the virus passes soon enough.
well, I mean, if things are getting worse by the minute, I'm not even joking about this. Like,
At the beginning of this podcast, the NBA has canceled the remainder of the season.
oh, and Tom Hanks has the coronavirus. So, you know, if you want to know where in the decline of civilization we are at this particular moment in time, like, anyway, all that aside,
Disclaimer: any celebrities that get the coronavirus will probably be fine.
we can get that into that after the show. I'm just saying, you know, this is just what I saw on the news.
Oh no, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, anyway, so John, as always, it was good having you on the program.
Yeah, it was great being on.
Yeah, certainly a memorable time this time. And let's see, especially we can have you back on the program. Say, no, are you open June 24th?
Yeah, I should be good. That'll be the week before we fly out for AX, assuming that's still on. So that sounds good.
Okay. So until then, good luck with everything, and stay healthy.
You too.
All right. So Petty, play us to the next segment. All right. So welcome to this week's topic of discussion. I'm like, since the big video game news is just everything getting canceled, and you know, all of the announcements are being shifted and, you know, delayed. Like, you know, we talked about E3, but like South by Southwest was recently canceled, and that is where the next phase of Sonic was supposed to be revealed, and that's been pushed into April. So,
Moderate
you know,
concern from the Sonic fan in the room.
Oh come
it's
on!
always moderate. It's always at least
You're
moderate.
you're supposed to be in the part of the Sonic cycle where you should be glad you're still anticipating something good.
Yeah. Granted, we may have already gotten the big leak. You know, apparently that the Sonic Adventure games are getting made or remastered or something along those lines. Apparently,
been being leaked every year since you know
2000.
Yeah, that along with the current gen systems, they are going to apparently be getting all of the 3D Sonic games. I don't know if that includes Sonic 06 or like Sonic and the Secret Rings. You know, the stuff that we don't want to talk about. But,
As long as I get an HD version of Kellers, I'll be happy.
Well, yeah, Secret Rings is pretty bad because there's so little you could do. But if you made it actual regular controlled instead of touch controlled, it might not be terrible.
Or motion.
I almost kind of want to see if they could like make Sonic 06 like.
You mean actually followed through instead of rushing it out?
Yeah, like go back and like make the mechanics fucking work.
You know you fucked up when the demo on the Xbox Live is a better build than the launch product.
Reminder that this is a game in which every character has a power bar that is supposed to be depleted when they use their special action ability, and I think it works for one character. Every other character can just do their thing infinitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, but this isn't about how much of a mess Sonic 06.
Oh no, I'm just saying I'm curious if they remade it, if they'd bother like actually mechanically fixing it.
Well,
The plot is probably completely unsalvageable, but like the play experience might actually be able to be made less bad.
yeah, I'm like, but once again, Sonic 06 is a topic for another day. I'm like, we are talking about Final Fantasy V because, you know, because, like, because I wanted to talk about it. You know. Anyway,
Ah yes,
so,
the one where we must fight like men and women who are dressed like men.
or who may be a trans man, like.
I'm pretty sure Faris is mostly dressed as a man so that the pirates will accept her.
Right, but you know how times change.
Yeah. I mean, who
Mhm.
knows?
Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
We do not reject anyone who headcanons that Faris is trans.
Like,
Regardless, Faris definitely has the best costumes.
yeah. Like,
Mhm.
but anyway, so Final Fantasy V, aka the final form of the job system. Like, job system. People say it was invented in Final Fantasy III. That is not true. It's been there since the beginning. Like,
Well, Final Fantasy III
let
invented
me
the system where you
finish.
could change jobs, but the jobs were established in the first Final Fantasy
Yes.
game.
Yes, thank you. Like, but Final Fantasy V further refined the formula by, first of all, getting rid of the stupid penalty system, like, which served no purpose other than just to be arbitrarily punishing. It was
Mhm.
especially bad because Final Fantasy III had a penchant for having certain bosses that required you to have a certain job equipped. This boss is vulnerable to the Dark Knight ability, or this boss is vulnerable to the Geologist ability, kind of dealy. And it's like you either had to prepare before you went into the dungeon, or you switched. You had to wait however many battles it was to get good at that job. Final Fantasy V removed that restriction. You you switch between Mage Knight, Thief, or Time Mage, so on and so forth. You can do that instantly and with no penalty.
You can also swap into a class and then set the primary, or any actually, depending on how far you'd gotten, set some of the abilities of your previous class as things you can still use in your new class while you're still waiting to get the good abilities from it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, in fact, the ability unlocks are a big part of the entire system here, because it's not just you can junction a ability to when you switch another job, but you unlock that for your freelancer class.
Well, yeah, you have a base class that you start off with as freelancer that has no abilities of its own, but as you gain experiences in a class, some of the abilities that you gain from job experience are passive abilities, and the freelancer just automatically gets all of the passive abilities that you have mastered.
Yeah, and you can also master job abilities this time around. Each job has 10 levels, and when you master that, you will get like the best ability, or well, it's like I don't think there's any magic system that goes 10 levels.
Well, arguably, you get when you're in the class of White Mage, you can cast any level of White Magic spell.
Right.
But you have to unlock the ability to cast higher level spells while you're in a different. Because when you start out, you have attack, item, and then like 2 empty slots, or defend in an empty slot or something. And you can. And each class, when you're in it, fills in one of the empty slots, and then you have another empty slot you can either equip a special passive ability in, or if you've mastered a job that gives you another active ability, some of them do more than one, you can put that in there. That's actually one of the things that makes the Mimic class, which is the late game bonus one, overpowered, is that it has 3 empty slots. So you can customize its that, and it gets all the passives like the Freelancer does.
Right. And I'm pretty sure all of the old jobs return.
Actually, another thing that they did is they significantly refined the jobs. In this game, pretty much all of the jobs are different. In Final Fantasy III, there was Black Mage and more different, better Black Mage, and White Mage and more different, better White Mage.
Yeah, mind you, that is a thing that was in Final Fantasy One. Like Final Fantasy One had that same kind of system.
Right, but in Final Fantasy III, like there are actually quite a few jobs. There are at least 4 or 5 jobs that are just previous job except better. And then at the end of the game, except in the DS version, you get the Sage one, which is basically just like all of the magic classes except not as good at swords as a red mage. And the ninja class, which is just like better than most of the martial classes. In 5, all of the classes are, I'm not going to say they're all equally good because there are a couple of pretty lame ones, but they're all like different.
I mean, let's face it, Bard never stopped sucking.
Yeah, I don't think Bard has much that it does. Neither actually. Well, Dancer, if you set the thing that gives you so you almost always do sword dance, it's not bad.
Yeah. Like, Animal Tamer is tricky to master.
That's a weird. It's almost like Blue Mage, except for like it's fire and forget. Like you like, oh hey, I'm fighting such and such a monster. I'm going to capture it, and then in a later battle, I will release it, and it will do a thing based on what it was.
Now, probably the most renowned job crafted for Final Fantasy V is the Blue Mage. This was
the first time you really got to use spells that opponents could use, like all of those spells that do stuff based on what level you are, or the best guard spell in the game and the best healing spell in the game. With the downside of you have to survive getting hit with it first, and if it's a healing spell, you have to trick an enemy into using it on you.
Right.
But yeah, since then, that and having rounded stats, Blue Mages routinely get, if you really seek it out, several of the best spells in the game.
Yeah, I'll be honest, Blue Mage Mastery was not something I ever indulged in.
It's a huge pain in the ass, but it's always appealed to me because they're cool.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's kind of the return on investment right there. You get the arguable best magic, but you've got to really invest time to get the Blue Mage up to snuff, and that's not just Final Fantasy V. That is any Final Fantasy. The other jobs that were created for Final Fantasy V, Time Mage, which I don't think carried on, because they just merged the time magic into black magic.
Time magic has been treated in various different ways. In this game, it has all of the stuff that's obvious time stuff, which before Final Fantasy IV, you couldn't really do stuff like haste and slow and stuff because everything was strictly turn-based. But I think those mechanics did exist in 4. But It also has like all of the spells that involve shooting people with things from space, like mostly Meteor. In 6, the Meteor spells got made black, and then all of the non-damaging spells were gray. But most games that have class systems still have time mages, except for Final Fantasy 12 Zodiac job system, I think, has green, or the original one. One of them has green mages instead. And I think 11 did something weird.
14, they gave, for a while, Astrologians had a lot of the time abilities. They stripped some of those out because they were easily abused.
And what is it in, not 7?
I'm not sure. Like, anyway.
10-2 doesn't have time mages, I don't think.
No.
Anyway, they have time magic has been a thing. Like it's in most of the tactics games.
Yeah. Like I said, time magic just ceased being its own thing. Like after this game, if I'm recalling correctly, like Final Fantasy V
comes back sometimes, but yeah, it's
No,
not reliable.
Yeah, I mean, but I mean, it's its own distinct magic. It's mostly under the black magic to simplify things because they kind of realized that they had maybe too many mage classes going on here, or rather, time mage didn't really add anything to the mix. Like,
well, they're the sort of the buff and control class, but
I get that, but that really didn't warrant a separate magic system. Whereas, the blue mage and the summoner have very distinct roles outside of, white and black magic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and the final class is the mime, which is another class I don't think persisted.
It's been in a few things. It's in tactics, but yeah, mime is really mostly like super freelancer, with that additionally has the ability to copy something else's action.
Yeah, and it is introduced by possibly dimension traveling character Go-Go, because Go-Go appears here and in Final Fantasy VI. Like, we do not know
significantly different, but there's no suggestion that the Go-Go in Final Fantasy VI isn't this Go-Go.
Yeah, I mean, what we do know is the Gilgamesh that appears in the various Final Fantasies is the same Gilgamesh as that Gilgamesh got cast into the void by Egg's death. And I suppose outside of refining the job system, Gilgamesh is the biggest contribution to the overall Final Fantasy that this game procured.
He has enough fun character traits to latch onto. He's always looking out for powerful swords. He frequently gets really shitty fake powerful swords. He's fairly personable and stuff, and he usually works for the bad guy, but is rarely particularly actually invested in working for the bad guy. He mostly just is doing it for a paycheck or something.
Yeah. Also worth mentioning is he has probably the most recognizable track of music from Final Fantasy V. Which technically isn't his, because the title is the Battle of the Big Bridge,
which is where you fight him the first time. I want to say
it's where you fight him the first time. It's not where you encounter him. But yeah, it's another reason why he was so memorable. Like, honestly, I think it's because he's like the only character in this game who has a distinct personality. That's not to say that your characters don't have personality, or Egg's Death doesn't have a extremely generic personality. More on him in a bit, but this game isn't renowned for its characters like Final Fantasy IV or VI or VII are. Like, it's a step above Final Fantasy III, like either version. Like, even the characterized version of Final Fantasy III isn't much to write home about. Like, the characters in Final Fantasy V are actual characters. Like,
they're characters. They have places in the world. They're not just, except for, even at the end, by the end, Bart's is like, you see that he had stuff set up that he makes sense to be in this.
Well, it's
but like you got a princess, you got a pirate lady, you got an old guy who gets replaced by his granddaughter, I think.
Something.
But yeah, they don't have that much character.
Well, more to the point, they have distinct personalities, which once again, you go back to the remake of Final Fantasy III. Yeah, they have backstories, and they have some characterization, but they're still pretty flat compared to like Bart's or Lena. Like, these are fully formed personalities filled with quirks and, wants, needs, all your basic stuff. But, they aren't complex characters like, Cecil or Kane or Rosa. Like you stack them against most of Final Fantasy Force cast, not all. I mean, that is kind of the downside of having, a shitload of characters. Not every character gets as much character development as they might want or need. Looking at you, say Palom and Porom.
I was gonna say they're basically almost a character if you add them together.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, but it's like they're the main characters of Final Fantasy V are comparable to some of the lower tier characters of 4 or 6, and above some of the characters in Final Fantasy VI. That's just because Final Fantasy VI has 24 characters.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VI has a few characters that are very well distributed, or very well characterized.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few characters who have like a one-sentence character description and then a side quest where you learn something interesting about them.
Right. I mean, the cast of Final Fantasy V would be lower than Terra or Salas or Locke or Ed, but way above, say, Umaro or Mog or Go-Go.
Gao is maybe.
Gao gets a bit of backstory and character development.
It's easily missable, but yeah.
But once again, there is no character in Final Fantasy V that is comparable to, say, Cyan, who's honestly one of the most complex characters I've seen in the JRPG period.
Mm-hmm.
But that isn't why you play Final Fantasy V. Nobody says you should play Final Fantasy V for its characters or its story. Its story is pretty much the last time a mainline Final Fantasy trots out the 4 crystals. I'm like, crystals still show up in Final Fantasy, make no mistake, but this is the last time where crystals are the MacGuffin.
Yeah, this is the game. Well, what the crystals do in this game is you get the crystals, you get your jobs from the crystals because previous heroes stored their memories of their adventuring prowess in the crystals, basically.
Well, it's also to save the world, because Final Fantasy V has a proto-environmental message. It's something that's very preliminary compared to, say, Final Fantasy VII, but it's still there. It's these technologically advanced societies are abusing these crystals into oblivion. Insert analog to climate change or finite resources here. Like I said, it's there, but it's it's not really explored like it is in Final Fantasy VII. No, it's just a plot device for motivational purposes, basically. Mind you, this game does continue on the tradition from Final Fantasy IV, where there are actually 8 crystals, but they only gave a shit about the first 4 because World 2's crystals just all show up at once.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to our main villain, who is Eggstead, who is one of the laziest Final Fantasy end bosses ever seen. Not the laziest. I think that still goes to the Cloud of Darkness.
Hello, meet Eggstead. Eggstead is a tree. It is also somehow a wizard.
We're not exactly sure how that happened, but it did. Mind you, Exdet does make for an intimidating final boss, or rather, Neo Exdet does. I mean, regular Exdet kind of looks fucking stupid. I've always thought that.
Yeah, I never found his original form all that intimidating either.
Once again, aside from Exodus' dumb backstory, his look is fucking generic. Like, he's basically a blue and white here version of Golbez.
Until he turns into a tree.
Right.
Or rather, no, it's not turns into, it's revealed that he was actually a tree.
But I'm talking about, like, his humanoid form.
Yeah.
Like, and his motivations are about as generic as you can get. He wants to take over the worlds, or rather, he wants to get the power of the cleft of dimension because he's evil. Once again, like, Final Fantasy hadn't quite solidified villainous character motivations. Like, even 4 almost had it right, and then it pulled the the whole Darth Vader thing. And Zeramus was barely, like, he was portrayed as a pure force of evil. Like, when you compare that to even fucking Kefka, who basically the Joker, who succeeds in destroying the world. But Kefka's got layers to him where a lot of earlier Final Fantasy villains do not. Like, Golbez is probably the most advanced villain here, and he was fucking mind controlled. But once again, that just goes into the overall thesis of Final Fantasy V. Its plot, its characters, its villains, they are for the most part serviceable. You're playing this game for its battle system. You're playing it for the job system.
Final Fantasy V is replayed by many people almost every year in a special challenge called the 4 Jobs Fiesta, where you basically, in addition to possibly a couple of other random challenges, you are randomly assigned one job from each of the 4 crystals, and that is the only job from that crystal that you can use. So if you're lucky, you can get 4 good classes, and if you're not lucky, you can end up with, like, fucking... I don't know exactly what's in which, but you could end up with, like, thief, monk, bard, and time mage, or something like that.
Right. And this game has gotten a couple of re-releases. Probably the definitive version of this game is Final Fantasy V Advance. Excuse me. Final Fantasy V added some new content, some new jobs.
4 new jobs of varying, but none are particularly low levels of gimmickness. Which you can unlock, I think, fairly late in the game, and also a bonus dungeon to play around with them in, as was the standard for Final Fantasy re-releases at the time.
Yeah. And the bonus dungeon actually is actually storyline related. Unlike, say, like the bonus dungeons in Final Fantasy IV or Final Fantasy VI, because in the Sealed Temple, you will fight the super boss Enuo, or Enuo.
It's Enuo, and I think that's actually like an ancient Babylonian thing or something.
Probably. But it wouldn't be the first time Square raided the public domain. But Enuo is in the original version of the game. He is mentioned as the evil overlord who first brought chaos to the world by trying to gather the power of the cleft of dimension, and he was defeated by the heroes who wielded the 12 deadly, the 12 deadly weapons or the 12 power weapons. There is a ultimate weapon for each job class.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Final Fantasy V never got the DS remake treatment. There is no full-formed, full 3D version of this game yet.
Which is kind of unfortunate, because what we did get is a mobile remake with the usual awful mobile redrawn graphics, which for some of the monsters, they look good. But for the characters, this is one of those games that was like middle SNES, had like pretty solid developed sprite art style. Then did not get redrawn well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
See also the mobile version of Mega Man X.
Oh,
Yep.
God.
Yeah. And it's also worth noting that Final Fantasy V did get a technical sequel. I might be the only one who knows of Legend of the Crystals, or at least watched it.
It rings a bell.
Okay, Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals was a 4-episode OVA released in the mid to late 90s, depending. It was released in 1994, but I think it came out here about 1998. I remember having the VHS once upon a time.
Oh, yeah. I remember it now.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
it's.
I had heard of this, but I didn't know it was in any way related to Final Fantasy V.
Very tangentially. Like one of the four warriors is a direct descendant of Butts or Barts. And
yeah,
they
all of
also
the characters in this had their names slightly changed for the English version, except I think Faris.
Well, I'm like, and the Exdeath got translated into Exodes, which honestly is an improvement there.
It got translated as Exodus and a couple other things too. So
Not Exodeath.
no, I know it's different than that. I'm just saying it's not the first time they've gotten its name weird.
Well, it's like I think they were going for Exodeath or Exodus, but the voice actor mispronounced it, and so it came out. I distinctly remember he said Lord Exodes. Yeah. Keep in mind this thing came out in 1998. I'm like,
Yeah.
people who want to have fucking sub
Dubs
versus
hadn't
dub.
been invented yet.
No, dubs had been invented. You just wish they hadn't been. Like,
Yeah.
complain about dubs today. Like, I want you to go listen to some shit from the 90s. Like,
Indeed.
oh God, you do not know how well you have it.
Indeed. Yeah.
Like, and like outside of some tangential references to Final Fantasy V, it does take place on the same world, but that doesn't matter. Like, you get a mention of like the air and the water crystal and like a couple of the countries like Waltz, if I'm remembering correctly. But it doesn't matter because it's all everything else here is new and dumb and awful. Believe me, I felt like my money was wasted on this thing. Like, it's just a very, very garbage release that rightfully remains obscure. Like, and speaking of awful things done to Final Fantasy V, I'll close out by mentioning the difficulty this game had in coming to the West.
Yeah, this is one of those.
Oh, yes.
This is one of the 2-3 parts of the reason why Final Fantasy 3 was released. Final Fantasy 6 was released as Final Fantasy 3.
Yeah. So yeah, Final Fantasy V was initially looked at as being the North American Final Fantasy 3, but it was dropped because and like a lot of the problems for this game to come over was it was considered to be too hard. Out of the 3 mainline 16-bit Final Fantasy games, it is definitely the hardest.
Yeah, this is a game where, well, part
My,
I've always suspected that part of this is because it still has the smaller sprite style for overworld stuff, but this game has like at least one, I think more than one timed section with random encounters where the random encounters the clock still ticks down during.
including boss fight.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
it's not just like, oh, it's not just like stuff is hard, because when stuff is hard, you can usually grind through it. You can't grind through like not getting lost or missing or trying to get treasure and then oops, you went down too long of a hallway.
And then there was the the second attempt was they were going to bring over this game as Final Fantasy Extreme. The Extreme was not actually because it was the 90s, although I suppose that helped. But
Yeah.
Actually,
it was to be harder than Final Fantasy IV Easy Type.
Yeah, or Final Fantasy Mid Type. Like Final Fantasy IV over here is weird. I guess it's this weird combination of the two types, but that's Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy V had that canceled. I think it was because it was closer to the end of the generation and they didn't Squaresoft didn't want to invest the resources into it. There was an attempt to bring this game over to Windows 95 of all things. Like I think that was done via that was like a licensing agreement that fell through, and we would not get Final Fantasy V until officially, because the first time I played this game was on an emulator. Back in the late even back in the late 90s, things like Super NES emulators were pretty sophisticated things. Wasn't that hard to emulate a Super NES game on 90s computers, or at least late 90s computers. Remember, not just playing it on like Windows, there was a Mac emulator in the lab I was in, that's kind of thing. And point is, I had played it unofficially, but I did get the first official version, Final Fantasy Anthology, and oh my god, this translation needs to be mocked more. Look, we got wyverns as wyverns.
Yeah, letter Y, word meaning to catch on fire.
And then there is fucking Ferris's pirate dialogue.
Oh Lord.
Yeah, that was entertaining for about 0 seconds.
Yeah, because she's a pirate, you see, and she pretends to be a rough pirate captain dude. So, Yarhar, landlubbers.
Oh God, it never fucking stops. It's like Dragon
Buckle me swashes.
It's Dragon Quest levels of bad. Probably even worse because fucking gibbering monkeys handled this translation. Anyway, so that's the overview of Final Fantasy V here. There's a lot to it. Honestly, my least favorite of the 16-bit Final Fantasies, like Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy IV, I enjoyed much more. Although a lot of that does have to do with the fact that I have played the shit out of 4 and 6. 5, not as much. I have played it multiple times. I've beaten it multiple times, but the job system just was never enough for me compared to the meat that its contemporaries or Chrono Trigger offered. I do like it more than any of the NES Final Fantasies. To say nothing of the Final Fantasies I genuinely hate. You hate. You fucking pile of mess. Or 13. Just everything about 13. But Yeah, it's like in terms of Final Fantasy V, it'd be high on the list, but below others. Um,
I mean, there are a lot of Final Fantasies.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
There are 15 mainline ones. There are sequels, spin-offs. Final Fantasy has had a lot of entries into it. Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. The week ahead, no Friday show this week. So, coming up on the Sunday reviews, we will be having reviews of Elderborn, Metal AF Slasher. This is a first-person melee combat game. It's very weapons focused. This game really loves its weapons. More on that on Sunday. Let's see, we got Milo's Quest for the PlayStation 4. This is a top-down adventure game where you play as a dog. And yeah, Petty will be giving us that review. And finally, we have Wonderling for the Nintendo Switch, which is a platform game where you play as basically the Goomba. Like,
that's what it looks like, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like what if the Goomba rose to prominence? Is like that's in the tagline, not the tagline, but the promotional materials here. Yeah. And yeah, until Sunday, I shall wish you good gaming.